Oh, hello everyone, and welcome here to the Daily Quest number 52. Wow. It's been a few days. It's been a crazy week with lots of qualifiers. The Heroes of the Storm Spring Championship qualifiers have just completed this past weekend. North America and Europe, all done. 8 teams for each region have all advanced, and they will be playing in the upcoming bracket happening in Los Angeles and Katowice, respectively. So very exciting stuff. Can't wait to see all of that unfold, to see who is truly the strongest team after massive roster changes that happened since BlizzCon. What roster is even close to what they were? Cloud9 with one member swapped out. Beyond that, that is about it. Just about everyone else has changed up significantly. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about Illidan. Listen to those D2 jams in the background. Yeah. Somebody in chat said Marachi. I guess that's I'm probably saying that word wrong. I assume that's the instrument that's quite prominent in that song. Very, very handsome sounding instrument, that's for sure. Well, once again, we're sticking to a bit of a different style of Daily Quest, where it is really just a discussion about a specific hero and what makes that hero good and when that hero is going to excel in various situations. And we're going to utilize a combination of heroesnexus.com and a combination of the game itself. And just Heroes Nexus, we're just going to utilize the talent calculators. Let me just set that up real quick. So prepared for the show. We'll even give it a nice little fade for when I swap back and forth. Boom. Oh, yeah. So, Illidan is a hero that's starting to pick up a little bit of momentum. He doesn't have battle momentum, but he's still picking up some momentum in the game at the highest level. Now, he's always been around. Illidan's like the first hero in Heroes of the Storm that received a rework. He used to have a base kit silence, which is like non-existent. Like, sure, there's polymorph, so that's kind of a silence. He used to be very different. Blizzard reworked him, and they made him into the Legolas of Heroes of the Storm. They referenced The Hobbit, where Legolas is bouncing on the barrels in the river, and they said they want to make Illidan like that. Cool. When they did that, Illidan became a very prominent, very powerful hero. He's so good, especially when you're ahead, at pushing down those fights and really cleaning up the opponent. But as the meta changed and as there were patches and nerfs and buffs to a variety of heroes, it always changes heroes indirectly. And Illidan's a hero that really started to fall out of favor when it came to a very stun-centric meta. Well, fast forward a few patches, we're starting to see a few changes. Gravity Lapse is now down to 1 second. They removed the micro stuns on Muradin. Just stuns, like several stuns. I mean, even Lunar Flare being nerfed. They're nerfing stuns a little bit here and there. And Illidan also received a buff to his auto attack damage. Now, his trait gives Illidan lifesteal, so by buffing his auto attack damage, it effectively buffs his trait indirectly as well. Before we really move any further ahead to talk about situations and heroes that pair well with Illidan and why he can definitely be seeing more play moving forward, let's actually just take a beautiful look at this great hero, the Betrayer himself, Mr. Illidan, the Betrayer. You can read all this little flavor text. I have not read all the flavor text in the game. I really should read their little bios. It's like you know, Grinder. Illidan is all up in Grinder. This is exactly what he would put on there, and he'd get a lot of hits. I mean, look at that bod. So we have Dive, you know, as that first ability. This is really primarily used for positioning, and a lot of times I see players using Dive when they're fighting a mercenary camp, using Dive when they're fighting a wave of minions, and honestly, you shouldn't be. This is like the first tip I'm going to give you for Illidan is casting Dive is a DPS loss. It's a damage loss. You would be doing more damage per second if you just opted to not cast Dive, because you're spending time in movement where you're not attacking. He's got fast auto attacks, and he's just going to do more damage if you actually only cast Sweeping Strike constantly. Like, you just every 8 seconds, or actually the cooldown is going to get reduced a lot, but just cast Sweeping Strikes and you're going to actually see higher damage per second. This is true for taking a bruiser camp, a giant camp, pushing out waves of minions, or even just fighting. But dive is phenomenal for positioning, chasing, getting out of the way of things, retreating, you name it. It does have many strong implications. I'm not saying don't use the ability. I'm saying when you're in that ham status, when you're trying to do the most damage possible, unless you're trying to reposition for body blocking or whatever, you shouldn't be casting dive. Cast sweeping strikes as often as you can. Illidan, of course, being a frontline hero, he has self-sustained from his trait. We have, Betrayer's Thirst, 20% of all damage dealt is going to give him some healing, but it's also going to reduce the ability cooldowns, which is great. I mean, this is just huge, right? Every time you auto, your cooldowns go down a second. Whoa, that's huge. Now I can cast Evasion again, and this is a 15-second cooldown. So by getting Evasion off more frequently, it's going to really help him stay alive, and you have the Sweeping Strikes, your primary source of damage, and Dive, your mobility option. Lastly, we have the heroics, and trust me, we're going to go into the talents very soon. Metamorphosis is the standard, and this is all about sustainability. Now, this used to do a lot of damage, and they pretty much pulled all that damage off of it. It was really, really a heavy initiation for damage and just making Illidan really hard to kill, but still gives Illidan a nice big buff, and it makes him that much more scary. So you get the temporary health or bonus health, and you also get the attack speed. But then there's the Hunt, and this is like the pub stomper heroic of the gods. This is not something you ever see in competitive. Honestly, you don't see Hunt, and if you do, it's going to be called a troll pick because of how much less safe it is compared to Metamorphosis. But where Hunt does excel is picking off those squishy heroes, especially if the enemy team doesn't have a support, and you want to really get to the back line to kill that Li Ming, kill that Nova, whatever. There is definitely a case for Hunt in those kind of scenarios, and it is very fun to execute and watch. I mean, when Illidan goes flying across the screen and he's on my team and I see him slaughtering a Nova, I giggle like a little schoolgirl with excitement and joy because of how beautiful of a thing it is, just watching Illidan fly like a fairy princess. Now, Illidan is kind of on the rise, like I mentioned at the start of this video. Illidan is really starting to see a little bit more play. I mean, Equinox in particular has been playing. He played a lot of Illidan this past weekend. And there's a few reasons for that. Sure, his auto attacks got buffed. Like I mentioned, all the stuns and whatnot that are kind of getting reduced a bit. But it's also like the state of the support and what kind of supports enable Illidan style of play. And there's really a few combinations that work very well. Rhaegar, whatever you want to call him, the new support that's at the top of the meta, and Illidan go hand in hand together. Both of them, I mean, Rhaegar is a great dive buddy. You can dive in there. Chain Heal has more base heal. Earth Shield is phenomenal, especially when Metamorphosis is activated, because you've just got this Illidan that's in the face of the opponents that now has 15% of his health pool as a shield, and he's doing a lot of additional damage as well with that Lightning Shield attached to him. And again, Lightning Shield excels on targets that can stick to the target. Illidan is the best hero in the game at sticking to a target. So Rhaegar is a great combo for Illidan, but also we've seen great pairings with like Tassadar. I mean, Tassadar, when you go for Leeching Plasma and Kala's Embrace, he can cast that shield every 5 seconds, and that gives Illidan even more lifesteal. So he's getting a shield and additional lifesteal while he's in the face of his target. Really strong, but oftentimes when we see Tassadar, we also see another support paired with that. Now, you don't necessarily want to go Uther Tassadar. It's not like it's the worst thing in the world, but it's a little bit too all-in when it comes to healing, and not as much damage as you might like. Because unless this Killidan is the ultimate carry, you're kind of speccing too much into that. But other things that work well is Brightwing has great global presence. I mean, she's good for soaking lanes. She's got that global presence, like I said. She has the poly, so you're getting some CC, which Tassadar is lacking in, so you pair Brightwing Tassadar. And they both have good AoE, so they have good lane clear, which is crucial. So they have damage, they have lane clear. Those AoEs are good for many of the objectives in the game. And those two paired with Illidan is a strong one. But if you can't get Brightwing and you have Tassadar, you could go with Kharazim as well. And 7-sided strike style Kharazim with Iron Fists going in there. You don't have to go Iron Fist, you could go Transcendence. Also another really good addition to try to run with that Illidan player that wants to get all of that big bad damage done. Now, we talk about Illidan as being kind of a snowbally hero. He's all about momentum. And oftentimes when you're watching an Illidan in competitive, what you end up seeing is Illidan will dive in, and then he will sweeping strikes out. He'll actually just be poking. And that's just because Illidan isn't really the safest hero to just stay in there the whole fight. He knows that he is a priority target to kill. The enemy team wants to eliminate Illidan by landing a stun and following it up with ideally a second stun. And oftentimes that is enough unless the Divine Shield, Ancestral Heal, whatever comes through to save Illidan's butt and allow him to get out of there. So you'll see Illidan players actually like just go in, poke, do a little bit of damage, and back out, heal up, heal up, heal up, and then do that again. And they'll even poke in, go to the wave, heal up off the wave, and then dive back in. And that's fine to do as Illidan, just poking, 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 because what he excels in is finding heroes that might be a little bit out of position, finding a hero that is off to the side and not with their healer, not with their warrior, can't get the peel. And Illidan could really apply the pressure because he's in a one-on-one situation. He can duel most heroes. So that's what you're going to look to do is Illidan, and of course, Illidan shines in situations where the enemy team is retreating. Once he is in there chasing, finding those fleeing targets, he is an absolute beast because he's the janitor. He just cleans up the fights better than any other hero in the game, arguably. Maybe Li Ming's better, but Li Ming's just about better at everything. That's just what she does. She's going to get nerfed, guys. Don't worry. Don't worry. So let's take a look at some of the talents and some of the styles of Illidan that you might expect to see within Heroes of the Storm. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and utilize the talent calculator rather than this. So, yeah. So in Illidan, we've talked a lot about his sustain. We've talked a lot about the way you have to play him. We talked about pairings that work well with the hero in general. But how do you build him? How is Illidan going to receive the most effectiveness as a hero in general? And this is probably my biggest gripe with the hero in general, is just his lack of build diversity. There's a cat. It's real. It's a real cat. Lack of build diversity is definitely an issue for Illidan, and I would love to see more talent reworks or something to help with this in the future. Oh, there we go. But generally speaking, you can look at Illidan and say, all right, I'm going to grab, probably just going to go Shadow Shield with Immolation and First Aid with Metamorphosis, and then I'm probably just going to go Sixth Sense, Stone Skin, and, yeah, sure, yeah, Bolt. Yeah, Bolt sounds good. Bolt sounds good. That's like a pretty basic Illidan build for a lot of players. But we're starting to see a little bit of mix-up, and there's definitely some flexibility you can do. Now, of course, if you're feeling really confident and you just want to go mega ham and you've got those supports, Nexus Blades is, again, that's additional damage dealt, which means additional healing received from his trait. Definitely worth grabbing. And of course, Demonic Form, another very viable option at level 20. But let's just erase all of those and go from the top. Illidan needs sustain, straight up. He needs sustain. But his level 1 talents, like Seasoned Marksman, this is a little bit too all in because he's going to have too weak of an early game if you go for Seasoned Marksman, and he needs this shield. So Evasion will give you a shield at base for 5 full seconds. If this was like a base ability, like part of his E, maybe a little bit weaker and you had to spec into it to make it stronger to some extent, I feel like this would help Illidan substantially with his sustain because you will almost never see Battered Assault, and this is kind of a cool talent because this is like going all in, right? You get additional auto attack speed after you Sweeping Strikes, and you're going to be using Sweeping Strikes all the time. That sounds really good, but still not something we really ever see. Regen Master doesn't really make sense. He already has so much self-sustain. I can't really imagine a world where I would want to grab Regen Master over Shadow Shield for a sustained environment. So if you're playing Illidan, you're really just best off grabbing Shadow Shield because of the amount of, damage you can absorb with that talent and how effective that is for the hero in general. We talked about my opinions and most of the competitive scene's opinions on Dive, and it's the lack of damage that it provides and how it's always going to be a damage loss just based on the way Illidan's designed. So if you're going to get an additional basic attack damage after dive, just like a nice crit after you dive in, how often are you going to be diving? Are you really going to get good damage done with that? Like, is that worth grabbing? Probably not. It really just isn't that strong. Fell Reach, this is kind of cool. You get additional range. You want to be able to use that Sweeping Strike as often as you can. But Immolation is just too darn good. Every time you Sweeping Strikes, you basically catch on fire. And this has so many other little things. Like, sure, this gives him much better damage per second. Illidan is one of the best heroes in the game at collecting mercenary camps. So this allows Illidan to grab a Bruiser camp or a Knight camp, or that's the same thing, or a Giant camp really quite easily. And on top of that, it has other implications, like it's going to reveal a stealthy if you miss that stealthy, but you have immolation active on your target and you walk past them, guess what? Nova, I can now see you, which means I can dive over you, block your path home, and then ruin your day. Also, good for cleaning up creep timbers. When you have this active, you can just step on the creep timbers, and it's just like Burning Rage, and you can just slowly destroy them as you walk around. Thirsting Blade, your basic attacks increase to 30 damage dealt. This sounds like really, like it could be really, really good for if he had other talents that kind of lended him towards maybe a little bit AoE or a little bit sustain or something to make up for like not having this AoE presence and not having the sustain. This could definitely be really good in some situations, but I just don't see it ever being better than Immolation. So actually just looking at the game really quick, we can just pop on over to Illidan land here in try mode, and you can see if we just toggle the cooldowns, you know, the sweeping strikes, 260 damage, pretty cool. That's pretty much for the positioning, and you can chunk down Arthas pretty well. He's just my jungle gym as I flip and flop all over the place, and bam, poor little Arthas. But then you start to get other abilities. Now, of course, evasion is great. Let's just take some damage, pop evasion, woohoo, everything's missing. That's awesome, that's great, right? But you grab Shadow Shield, and now every time you pop evasion, you get this nice little shield. So before you're even taking that damage, you also have this shield for 5 seconds. That's really just gonna help you sustain through so many more situations. And again, you can cast that shield so very quickly, especially with all the autos resetting. Sure, evasion's a 15-second cooldown, but every time you auto, it reduces that cooldown by 1. And very, very good. Immolation, same story. Base cooldown, 8 seconds. But now I'm on fire. I am actually just permanently on fire, and it's lovely. And I just have so much more damage output in general. Oh boy. Illa, don't do that. Now level 7, our next talent tier here, is when we start to see some actual diversity in builds. Dive retains its poopiness, and Rapid Chase, he's already the best hero in the game at chasing. He's already crazy mobile and all over the place, and Rapid Chase is just kind of unnecessary. It's not that it's crap, it's not that it's bad, it's just not really needed, you know? And Reflexive Block is like 2 block charges, but you've already got Invasion and you've already got Shadow, or the shield. So those are really going to cover all the situations in which you would need that. You're worried about spell damage, you're worried about auto attacks coming in. You've got it covered with Shadow Shield level 1. You don't really need Reflexive Block. Follow through could be kind of cool because he does do a lot of autos, and you know, having the additional damage by 40% after you cast an ability, cast a lot of abilities, could certainly give Illidan a lot of damage potential. But then you've got these last 2 talent options, which are really great. Now, for a very long time, we would pretty much only ever see First Aid, because when you First Aid channels for such a long period of time, 6 seconds is like the longest you're ever going to see an Illidan stay in a team fight, probably even longer than he's ever going to stay in a team fight. And he's got all of that self-sustain from his trait paired with First Aid, makes Illidan really sustainable. And you're probably going to cast 2 evasions during that, or not 2, but you're going to get an evasion off, and then you're going to be just about ready to cast your next evasion by the time First Aid expires, if you're auto-attacking as effectively as possible, which is great. You know, that's all good and grand. But then there's Thrill of Battle, which is actually really just going to allow you to get that evasion, get that sweeping strikes, all of that damage output, and the dive and safety maneuvers to get out of there off cooldown so much more effectively. And we saw Equinox using that to great success this past weekend. Pretty much he's gonna pop Thrill of the Battle every time he goes in, and the number of times he can cast evasion pays off for not having First Aid. But it also gives him more options in terms of mobility. So now your trait is activatable on a 20-second cooldown, and you just pop it here, and then your cooldown. I mean, I have cooldown reduction on right now, so toggle cooldowns. We'll have to turn that off when we actually show that off. I'm not even showing the game right now. I'm actually just running the worst show in the world. So Thrill of Battle, you activate that, and then it's 2 seconds every time you auto off all 3 of your basic abilities. So you can just see, I'll just pop this 15-second cooldown, pop D, and then you just see 15-second cooldown, my AAS. It's ready to roll. and Illidan's back in there. So definitely some cool power on that ability, especially when it comes to just, you're initiating, you're going to pop that trait and make sure you can evade again, and you're going to absorb and dodge a ton of damage. Lastly, Metamorphosis level 10. Sure, yeah, why not? Let's do it, and then flip on out and run away from the scary Lich King. Metamorphosis, like we talked about, there are situations where you would pretty much always get it. Now, I will just straight up say that more times than not, you should be grabbing Metamorphosis when you're playing Illidan. It's just a really, really strong talent, and it's hard to pass up. I mean, you turn into a demon, and you get more health and attack speed, and you just ruin your opponents. But the situation in which you pretty much have to get Metamorphosis, as far as I'm concerned, is when you're playing Quick Match and you don't have a warrior. At level 10, Illidan can effectively become a warrior replacement, which is actually quite valuable. And he's in the front line, he's popping evasion, he's staying alive for forever, and he has all of this self-sustain. And that just makes such a difference for the team in many, many, many situations. So I advise getting it almost all of the time, but there are situations where you do have a good front line already, and the enemy team has a lot of squishies that are doing cheeky things, and you want to go Nova hunting. That sounds like the most glorious thing in all the realm. You want to go Nova hunting. Go ahead, grab the hunt, have fun. It's not the worst ability in the world. It just gives Illidan so much less self-sustain. Metamorphosis not only great for initiating on targets and getting that big health buff, but also great for retreating over the wall. It gives him just a safe out option. He backs away. If you went first aid, you retreat with meta, then you pop first aid and you re-engage, because Metamorphosis is going to be active for you for a good 18 seconds. Like, that's like a long time for a heroic to be active. And you can do a lot during that 18 seconds. You can pace around. You're not forced to stay in the fight. You can wait, heal up off the wave, and then re-engage, depending on the situation. So definitely a very strong talent, but Hunt could certainly be very fun as well. On this build, we're just going to suggest that you go with these talents so far. We've given all the reasons up to this point. Level 13, you can start to see a bit of diversity at this point in the game. Now, Giant Killer is always going to be good against big health pool enemy heroes. If you're going to be dueling Sonya, you're going to be dueling an Arthas, a Cho'Gall, heroes like that fairly frequently, this gives him more auto attack damage. That auto attack damage, again, the same rule applies. You're doing more damage, therefore you're getting more health steal and healing yourself more. Giant Killer's great, why not? It's definitely got situations where it's phenomenal. And it's always funny to watch Nazmodan that's like not going in all shell burn build, not going in E build. Say it's a glow build, try to fight an Illidan that has gone Giant Killer, because Azmodan has a huge health pool. Like, a lot of people don't realize how much health that hero has. And Illidan just starts wailing away at him, and it looks like Azmodan's not actually hurting him. Like, it's kind of sad. I feel so bad for the Azmodan. I'm like, this is just like a fat kid fighting a ninja, and I feel awful watching this. But, it is what it is. Lunge, no, don't do it. Friend or foe, kind of cool. It's kind of like the safety ravage that carry can get, where you can flip and flop on all your allies. Wait, you can dive on allies, but you will not flip. Okay, so you don't flip and flop. Sorry, I actually don't know if I've ever grabbed that talent though. Cool idea. Still probably not worth it, because you already have sweeping strikes, right? Do you need a friendly dive when you have a skill shot dive forward? I don't think you do. I really don't think you do. I think it's kind of like a redundant talent for Illidan. Unbound, ignore, collision. I've seen people use this to like some of the weirdest ways, to the point where I thought the game was broken. And like, you think about Sky Temple. And I wish I could pull it up here as quickly as, like, magic. But Sky Temple, think about the middle lane on Sky Temple, where there's the top part of the lane is separating the middle shrine of Sky Temple. There's a bit of a gap there where sometimes if a hero dies, they'll fall down into the sky and go flying away, and we all feel sad for them, and we all just mourn for 2 seconds, then we giggle and laugh because they fell off the map, and that's funny. You think about that part of the map, and Illidan can actually use this talent to dive across that, which is really kind of cool. But there aren't enough situations where that's actually going to get like a ton of value. Arthas, we're gonna kill you for the stream. We're gonna do it. We gotta do it. Arthas, we got unlimited cooldowns. And now we're blocking everything. Anyways, so like, can I dive through this? Yes. Cool. Like, that's cool. And like, you could definitely make some really flashy plays by doing this sort of thing. But I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's worth a full talent. Like, what did we give up? What did we give up to grab Unbound? We gave up 6 cents. And in almost every single game where you're playing Illidan, there's going to be a Li Ming or a Kael'thas or a Nova or some pesky ability power hero. And evasion is something you're going to be casting pretty much as often as you humanly can. So, 50% reduced damage from all abilities. While evasion is active, this includes heroic abilities, Pyroblast, Precision Strike, you name it. 50% damage reduction. Click it. It's pretty good. It's a pretty darn good talent. As fun as Unbound is, and as good as Giant Killer is, 6 cents is Gosu. Now, if you don't know what Gosu means, I think the actual literal definition is something along the lines of master in Korean. And that's something they used to say a lot in StarCraft too. Cool. Knowledge. Anyways, wow, my camera is mega zoomed in today. Level 16, we're moving down the line. We're getting towards the end of some of the different reasons and builds that you see out of Illidan. Hunter's Onslaught. Abilities heal for 15% of damage dealt. Sounds good, right? Does it end up like paying off that well? Is he an ability power hero? Does he have other ability power empowering talents? Does he have another talent at all that really gives him a lot more ability power? Not really. No. Huh. Now that you think about it, Jake, no, you're right. Why would I ever grab this talent? You wouldn't. He's an auto attack hero. This talent is garbage. Don't ever get it, because I just don't see the point. He is really, in and out, just an auto attack hero at the end of the day. He doesn't even get, I don't think he gets healing from anything other than basic attacks. Yeah. So his ability power doesn't actually give him additional sustain, because all of his sustain comes from basic attacks, not at all from abilities. Awful talent. Awful. Bad Blizzard. Design a better talent. Level 6, like, why is that a level 16 talent too? Like, I guess it gives him burst. Second sweep, this is kind of cool. You get a second sweeping strike. This gives Illidan crazy mobility options. He can really be, in and out and do a lot of damage, but his cooldowns are reduced so much with this build, with his trait, that sweeping strike's cooldown ends up being negligible. Like, if you pop Thrill of Battle and you sweeping strike, you can use the next sweeping strike within like 2 seconds. Do I need a second sweeping strike charge? Well, I have it with this. Problem solved. Why spend a level 16 talent? And then it comes to 2 generic talents that give Illidan a lot more sustained. And these have varying situations where each is better. The general is Stone Skin is always going to get a lot of value. It's 30% of your health as a shield. Now, note, if you pop Metamorphosis and you get the heal, the health buff, this benefits from Stone Skin as well. So you never want to Stone Skin and Metamorphosis. You always want to meta in, get your big health buff, and then pop Stone Skin after. And that's going to give Illidan that big health pool that allows him to just stay in there and get a ton of self-sustain and healing after he's already starting to take damage. So that means that you don't necessarily want to use Stone Skin immediately. You really want to kind of take a little bit of damage and then have that shield come up so that you're healing underneath it and, killing your opponents while doing so. And then suddenly you're just going to last that much longer in the fight and you get that much more utility. In an event where you're really just struggling to duel maybe another warrior or someone and just want a little bit more burst, Blood for Blood is never a bad talent. Like, it's a 10% swap. You take 10% of their health away from them and you absorb it as yours. Sure, it's a great talent, but I just see it in most situations, Stone Skin really being the better option. Now at level 20, he gets a permanent heroic, and there's not a ton of heroes that actually get permanent heroic. Well, some of the newer heroes do, I guess. But you think of like, BFG looping around the map. That's kind of cool. But this is a permanent form change where you're stuck in demonic form. It increases your attack speed of demonic form by 30%. So that's a big attack speed increase. And then 50% reduction in the duration of all disabling effects. That is what makes it so good. Illidan is a hero that struggles to stay alive when he gets stunned. If he gets stunned and then stunned again, back to back, and he's, a little bit too far forward, it's probably lights out for him. But a 50% reduction on all crowd control, that's really good. That's actually phenomenal. So this is what we saw Equinox do over this past weekend. This is pretty much his build right here, in and out of what he was running for the event. And his Illidan was top on the charts. Like, honestly, with this build, he was getting #1 damage in a lot of the games over several other very prominent heroes in the meta in the North America qualifier. Does this mean Illidan is like a top tier assassin in every situation? Absolutely not. He needs very specific picks and builds and synergies and just scenarios where he's going to get that full effectiveness. And you do have to play very cautiously. You have to dive in, poke, and back on away. Maybe force out a Stormbolt that whiffs, and that gives you even more opportunity. When you see stuns go out, that means window of opportunity. You see that Stormbolt has been cast. The Gravity Lapse is on cooldown. Those are all like fairly long cooldowns where Illidan can go in and do a lot of damage, and then you wait like the 7 seconds or whatever it is before you know that ability is about to be ready again, and you back away. But you need to be very aware of those kind of situations and realize that this might be a window where I can do more than I previously could have while that Stormbolt and Gravity Lapse or Lunar Flare are awaiting my entrance to this battle. Just to wrap up the level 20 talents, nowhere to hide. If you're going hunt, just get nowhere to hide. You're already picking a super silly talent that's really fun to use. Get the global presence and let everyone giggle or just rage at you, whatever they're going to do. Whatever the emotion is, nowhere to hide is going to amplify it. Nexus Blades, very strong talent. If you really don't think you need the crowd control lockdown and you just want to have a little bit more damage across the board, Metamorphosis, you can cast this while you're already in demonic form, so you can recast it. So it's not like you're losing that mobility. Nexus Blades is kind of cool, but I just see demonic form being better. Honestly, it's just better. Numbers just don't add up. Attack speed 30%, and then attacks deal 20% more. Movement speed is cool, but demonic forms, you look cooler. Like they just upgraded the graphics, and it's so handsome, such a handsome looking ability. Last but not least, we have Bolt of the Storm, and Bolt's good for getting out, but Illidan already has tons of mobility, and he does have Metamorphosis to basically be kind of like a Bolt when it comes to that retreat. Really don't see a situation where Bolt would be a preferred talent over demonic form in just about any world. Like really, I just don't see it. So if you're looking for an Illidan build, I'm gonna copy it right here. Bam, that's your build. And that is generally speaking what you're gonna go for. If you're really not feeling confident to use Throw of the Battle to its full potential and you wanna grab First Aid, do it, because it's definitely a great option. But if you're feeling like a ham sandwich and you just wanna go deep, grab Hunt, have fun. Good luck. And lastly, Giant Killer against big health pool heroes. Definitely not a bad option, but it's always hard to consider passing up 6th Sense, especially when there's pretty much always going to be a case for ability power reduction. If it looks like they've got no ability power whatsoever and it's like the weirdest game in the world where there's just no AP, go ahead, grab Giant Killer. You want to get unbound and do some silly things, go for that as well. But in general, Illidan is a hero that we will probably start to see a little bit more of. I wish he had a little bit more talent diversity at the end of the day. I truly do, because overall we see the same style of Illidan in most games, where 1 through 7 he's pretty much grabbing the same exact talent, but teams are starting to use him a little bit more. He pairs so well with Rhaegar, so grab a buddy, tell him to play Rhaegar, tell him Rhaegar is really OP, pick Illidan yourself, and see exactly how much damage you can do. If you get the most esports epic Illidan game of all time, you can send your replays to solidjigegg@gmail.com, and there's a chance I will cast them. Now, today's Tuesday. Tuesday. That's such a fun word to say weirdly. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and generally we do Wonky Wednesday where we cast weird games and weird styles of play. But tomorrow will actually just be an EduCast, which is just generic. We cast games and we give feedback and criticism based on what's good and what's bad and what could be done better in those matches. Of course, if you send matches in, I do prefer to know if the game was Team League or Hero League, and if you want to check your MMR on Hot Dogs or Hot Slogs, let me know what your MMR is and whatnot. Just because it's always good to try to get a diversity. Sometimes I cast 2K MMR, sometimes I cast 4K MMR. And everywhere in between, I just try to mix it up because there's a lot of different, there's different learning tips I can give. But at some points, it's really hard to give feedback to, especially when it's quick match. It's really hard to give constructive feedback when it's like Li Ming, Kael'thas, Rhaegar versus Li Ming, Kael'thas, Rhaegar. It's just kind of weird, and those games are just kind of a toss up. And a lot of times, it's just like, who cast Living Bomb better? This guy did. He pressed D first and he cast it twice. He won the fight. Oh my god. So, yeah, cool. Be sure to send me some emails. Much appreciated to everyone that does send in those emails every week with replays. And thanks for tuning in to the Daily Quest number 52. I will be continuing the stream in just a moment. And that's just about it. So, see you in a bit. GG's.